Okay, I think we're live. That's better. Let's invite Ruxandra. Instagram is being kind of funny lately, so I hope it doesn't. Mess us up. Cool. Hope you're all having a good week. We're already halfway through the week. And there she is. Is it? I've sent you the request, but I don't know if it's working or not because it's been a bit funny. So let me know if it's not working and I'll try again. Right. Trying again. There we go. Hello.
Hola.
Hola. How are you doing?
Fine. I was a little nervous because I'm not very good with technology. I was hoping this was going to work.
No, absolutely. There is always a first time. And then after that one, everything goes a lot smoother. So don't worry. We've gotten through the worst part. But yeah, awesome. Well, we have already people joining. Thank you so much, everyone, for being here this evening, and thank you so much, Ruxandra, for being here today as well. Because I appreciate that it's starting to pick up everywhere. Hopefully, finally. So yeah, for those of you who don't know who we are, what we're doing, I'll do a quick intro, and then I'll let Ruxandra explain from her own mouth who she is, what she does, which is always better than someone else talking about you, I feel. But yeah, I'm Lily. I'm the CEO here at Travolution Tours, and I started this series of podcasts just to really give a platform to all tour guides around the world come together, share their opinions, their insights, wisdoms, and struggles, so that people, whether it's other tour guides or visitors, can understand a bit more about our job and how not necessarily straightforward it always is, because there is a lot of romanticism around our profession. So people from all over have agreed to join, and we are now on episode 7, which is Ruxandra's episode, and she's joining us all the way from Romania, from Bucharest. So over to you, Ruxandra. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Lily. And well, hello to everybody. Well, my name is Ruxandra Elena. I'm 35 years old. I'm a native of Bucharest, and next week I will be celebrating 15 years of working in tourism, actually. I mostly work in Bucharest myself, since it's my hometown and I'm really proud of it. I'm a licensed tour guide. I have my own tours, but so far I've mostly worked in collaboration with different local tour companies. First big companies, which I sort of hated, and now small businesses. And well, I enjoy doing walking tours in Bucharest because I think it's the best way to really discover our city.
For sure. No, I mean, I love it because I've always thought about going to Bucharest, but it's not always the easiest destination to go to from many places in Europe. So I was hoping you could tell us a bit more about your city and why people should go whenever they can. Because I also appreciate, particularly during COVID and everything else, in Romania, things weren't always very straightforward or easy for people living there or for people to go and visit. So I'm sure a lot of people could benefit from knowing more about Bucharest and why it's awesome and why they should come to you and travel. So tell us a bit more about the city and why is it so special?
Well, my experience with Bucharest is probably similar to that of a visitor in the sense that I didn't really think when I was little I was living in a famous place or a place somebody would be curious to visit. I guess when everybody dreams of traveling, at least in Europe, they dream of France and Spain, of course, and Italy. Um, and so I discovered the city really as a surprise myself. My first job in tourism was in a fixed location. I think this is similar to your story. I was a local host at the Palace of Parliament, which is the biggest, most ambitious building ever made in communism in Romania. And before I worked there, I didn't know the place could be visited. So I had lived in the city all my life. And when I was a student, I was hoping to find a job to help me pay tuition. And a friend of my mom's told me they were interviewing young students to become guides in the Palace of Parliament. And that's the first time I ever heard it was open to visitors. This was a while ago. This was in 2007. And that's where my curiosity began. Well, for the history of my city and for the history of communism in particular. Since its recent history, it only ended 30 years ago. Opinions are wildly different than how people remember it. We are taught very little in school about this history. We're taught more about the glorious times, the ancient times, the times of the monarchy, which were very successful to Romania, but not so much about the dictatorship from communist times. And so I started to do my own research, and guests were also asking me a lot of questions about this history. At the parliament, we would receive about 1,000 people every day in the guided tours, big groups, shouting and hoping everybody can hear you. Yeah, and the guests were curious. I mean, we had the set of basic information provided to us, of course, because it is like a museum, so you have a schedule to follow. But whatever people were curious about, I was curious about myself. And that's when I decided also to start preparing to work in tourism. So eventually I took a professional course and I got my license with the Ministry of Tourism. And since then, I really have not gotten bored doing tours because there's always something you discover in a city as big as Bucharest. And also, I think my job keeps me optimistic about the future because the people have already been through so much and they've been so resilient. So even now with COVID, which has been horrible to everybody, of course, I always think, you know, this will pass as well. Yeah, if you come to Bucharest, definitely, I would recommend as an introduction on the first day tour about the history of communism in particular, and just really discovering the contrasts of the city, because you have these cozy, beautiful old palaces, and then you have the cold communist blocks that overwhelm you and that were, I think, made as a sort of home court advantage to all leaders to show off that the Communist Party could build bigger than anybody else. So yeah, there's a lot of things to see in Bucharest.
Yeah, no, I'm glad you've mentioned this, and you know, it's funny because I think mostly, particularly in Europe, when we travel around this continent, because a lot of the history of mankind has happened around Europe, we think of, you know, things in the very distant past, right? Like Roman, medieval, maybe early modern, But like you said, because some of these things are still very close to us, within, maybe not within our lifetime, but our parents, our grandparents' lifetime, it we tend to give it for granted, or like you say, a lot of people maybe haven't gotten over it. There is diverse opinions. So it's a bit hard to access this history, which I find really frustrating because it's the most recent past, is the thing that is directly affecting our lives now. So we need to engage with it a lot more. I had a very similar experience about everything that you're saying. Reminds me a lot of when I visited Bulgaria and I went to Sofia. And I went to Sofia because obviously, well, it was part of the, Byzantine Empire, and who doesn't want to see that? But Sofia, like Bucharest, had a very prevalent period of communist history. And when I actually expressed interest to going to the museum and visit it, like I was the only person there, for starters, which was really daunting. Because like all of the locals were looking at me, with the locals, I mean the people working in the museum were looking at me like, who is this person? Why is she here? And when I asked people that I met, in Sofia itself, they were like, why do you want to go there? We don't go there. We don't want to. Why would you want to see statues of Lenin or whatever? It's like, without understanding what happened here during that period, I can't understand your city. I can't understand you. So I'm always very happy when you put these things forward because of that, because you're reminding people, this needs to be addressed. We need to deal with this. And it also resonates with me strongly because I think we have a very similar problem in Spain with the dictatorship. It only ended 40 years ago. And if you talk about it, people kind of hold their breaths, and that's kind of it. We are breaking through it, and I think we are breaking through it a lot because there's been like a lot of television and films and things like that have been done about it recently. But it's still a lot of effort. So, these things are super, super important. And it's always something that I'm glad when I see it. And particularly when you do it, because like you said, you always are optimistic. And this is something that I've always noticed from the beginning, from your post. I was like, this girl is so happy. She's talking about some very depressing things, but it's so happy. And it's great that you can do that because it kind of breaches a very difficult subject. It's like, it's fine. We can still be positive about things that were traumatic because that was us. It doesn't mean that it has to define us forever. So, kudos to you for being able to keep up the positivity because you're doing a great job.
Thank you.
But yeah, so other than the communist parts of Bucharest and whatnot, what are like other interesting sites that you think people could miss or that really show what life is like in Bucharest?
Well, I'm hoping in the future, visitors will decide to spend more time in the city to enjoy it, because one of the challenges we have in Bucharest is visitors only usually reserve one day for the city. So imagine only having one day in Barcelona or one day in London. Yet, the city isn't the main source of tourism for the country or the main brand. So usually it's just a stop on the way to go to the places people already are more familiar with. Because we have a beautiful country as well. We're blessed with a coastline to the Black Sea, where you have modern beaches, but you also have a wild nature reserve. You have the mountains, the Carpathians, and you can ski and you can go hiking there. And just in general, because of the crossroads of our country between empires, we have a lot of castles and fortified churches and interesting places to visit. So because Bucharest is the largest international airport, normally people fly in and they expect one day to be enough and then move on to Transylvania or to other regions. But yes, if visitors would be kind enough to dedicate more time to my city, you could fill a week easily in our city. What I was talking about with my guest yesterday, for example, is how many places we have in the city for culture and how affordable they are. So you have a symphonic orchestra downtown in Bucharest, and there is an opera house as well. And you can buy tickets for as little as 4 or 5 euros. Um,
I'm
then,
there. I'm going.
then we have, of course, a lot of museums in the city, and usually people stick to the parliament since that's the most famous place. But we actually have a gorgeous art museum. We have a pretty interesting history museum in the city. If you visit that, you would get surprised to find out that Romanians are actually isolated in Eastern Europe, but they have very much in common with Italian and Spanish and Portuguese and French people because we were all born from the same Roman Empire. And inside the History Museum in Bucharest, there is a replica of Trajan's column, which sits in Rome and honors the victory he had in this region of Europe because we had a lot of gold mines and that brought the Romans here, and that's how Romanians were born 2,000 years ago. So yes, when you visit our city, by the way, you won't have any big challenges moving around and talking to people because Romanian as a language is Latin based. So it's very, very close to Italian, especially. And also we're taught languages in school anyway. So everybody's usually very nice and fluent in English and another international language.
Yeah, like this is always something that has surprised me, like bewilders me, in fact, because I think when we think of people that speak many languages, we always look at Northern Europe, right? Northern Europe and Germany, that's it. But every single Romanian person I've always known was fluent in Romanian, fluent in probably another Eastern European language, sometimes Russian, sometimes another one. Most of them could speak Spanish or Italian, no problem, and so on and so forth. Like I was just bewildered by that, amazing capability to come to grasp with other cultures. And when I realized that Romania was part of the Roman Empire, Romania has been part of all of these huge European empires, and we just forget. We are just so forgetful that this was a very important region for the development of Europe. That is really sad when that happens. I think is one of the, at least from my perspective, is perhaps one of the most misunderstood and sort of under cared countries in Europe in that perspective, because it has so much to offer. But like you said, people just think of Transylvania castles, Dracula, that sort of stuff, and skiing in the mountains, and that's it. And it's like, but there is culture and history here. People engage with it. So thank you for bringing that to the attention of everyone else, because for those of us who know it, we know how important this country is and how your culture is and why this is awesome. But I think there is that barrier still, and the fact that the capital is not being as successful in its tourism maybe has a role to play, because at the end of the day, if all you're selling, right, is nice beaches, skiing, and random tours around Transylvania, that cycle is gonna keep on going, right? You're not gonna break it. So that's something that I wanted to ask you, if you know, or if you can throw some clarity about it. Is this something that has happened, do you think, because Europeans or travelers just had this book's idea of Romania, of this is what Romania is, or because there hasn't been a good, strong enough campaign about what the country has to offer? Because sometimes it can be both ways. Sometimes I think we just have, as outsiders, we have preconceived notions and we just do that. And sometimes I think some of our friends in Morocco were saying is that the government itself is so, sort of close-minded as to how the revenue from tourism comes, that they don't think about advertising in other ways to tourists who probably would be very interested to find out about history, culture, gastronomy, and everything else. So I don't know if you can throw some ideas as to why do we travel to Romania and only see certain things and not Bucharest?
I think it's a shared responsibility, like you said. Maybe more the responsibility of the government in Romania, slightly more. I think they are still unaware that tourism is an industry that makes money for the country, and that's been obvious a lot in the pandemic because it's the industry that's had the least support from the government financially. And also, I think just they're not used to seeing tourism as an asset for the country because, to be brutally honest, a lot of our politicians are from the older days before the revolution against communism happened, or some of them are the descendants directly of the same people, and so they're used to a certain mentality, and maybe they think the assets of the country are simply the ones we had 100 years ago, which is heavy industry, agriculture, the big engines. I'm seeing a change maybe in the last year because the government is paying a lot of attention to the IT industry, so they can learn new things, but there is very little promotion for Romania abroad. I went abroad only once to a tourism exhibition. A few years ago, I was in Barcelona, and we were 5 agencies, I think, well, representatives of 5 agencies there. And the person the Ministry of Tourism had sent to coordinate us didn't speak English. Of course, didn't speak Spanish or Catalan. That would be really a high standard. But he didn't even speak English. So, yeah. That was a cold shower. But yes, I think there is very little publicity from the government for Romania as a destination in other countries, and it's a highly competitive market, of course. And they assume, they have other more valuable resources. And it is a vicious circle because then people who are curious about Romania go on the internet, and when they search for Romania or when they search for Bucharest, they usually see the same classical tour, and it's very hard to convince them to go off the beaten path, which is my focus really in my city tours. But yeah, everybody sees the same photos, the same postcard style publicity, and just wants to see the same 5 places. So I don't know where to start exactly what the solution would be.
No, but it is definitely one of those just repetitive cycles, right? Like they are unfortunately two effects that feed off each other. So it's hard to break away from them. But I think that's the reason why what you're doing is so important, because the more we talk about this, the more there's voices like yours saying, hey, we're more than just this. Come on, give us a chance. The more people are going to wake up to that reality. And as much as I hate to say it, because I don't like giving social media any credit, but I genuinely think social media in that sense is being quite helpful to letting people, access these opportunities and access this kind of information, right? Because otherwise, like you said, you just end up in the same sites that give you the same rundown of things, and you just can't break away from that. So it is hard, and I don't really have an answer for you. I don't know what the solution is, but I think little by little, with voices like yours and making more noise and whatnot, it will change, or at least it will create a seed that will help things to change. But no, the reason why I was thinking about this and I wanted to ask you about it is because precisely another friend of mine who's a tour guide, he's now in the expo in Dubai. So he keeps on uploading pictures of, all of the places that he goes, all of this stuff. And I am yet to see the pavilion for Romania.
Mm.
He's shown me all of Eastern Europe and the Balkans, and I'm like, but where is Romania? What's happened here? So when you were explaining this, I was like, it makes, sadly it makes sense that it's perhaps not as well represented, or maybe it doesn't have the same impact that would even make a guide go there and feel invited to it. So this is it. But again, this is something a lot of people don't always know about, that these things happen. Not just because tourism is a powerhouse everywhere, that means that your life is easy because you are in the capital. In fact, it's rather the opposite. So these are the conversations that are worth having and worth talking about. But as we have spoken about some not so upbeat things, one of the things that I really love about your page is like the personal connections that you make to a lot of places. And one of the ones that I really, really loved, and I really hope people go to your page and see this, is the sequence of posts that you have about doors from Bucharest. Like, where did that idea come from? Because it's super cool. And it's one of those things that I always go thinking, damn, that's a cool door. But like, how did you think, yeah, this is worth talking about? Like, tell us more about that, if you don't mind.
Well, strangely enough, this is one positive thing the pandemic made me do. So 2 years ago, when we were in full lockdown, we were, well, of course, stuck in our own neighborhoods. And so actually, I discovered how nice my neighborhood was because of the lockdown. Yeah, so I always used to think my neighborhood was just boring working class blocks from the 1970s, but it's actually quite an elegant district. Well, it's a mix, like Bucharest in general. So 10 minutes away from where I live, there's this gorgeous area with modernist houses, and the doors are just so creative there. And then if you go behind another curtain of boring working class blocks, you find this street with very traditional Romanian houses. And yes, it's the first time I can remember when I really started to pay attention to doors. And I thought, well, people are so invested, I guess, when they ordered their house. I guess they knew anybody passing by would get an idea about who they were, right? By looking at their door. So that really mattered. I don't know, in the 1930s, your first impression of somebody. And for the past 2 years, I've kept on, yes, with my series of doors of Bucharest. I try to post at least once a week. Yeah, so I'm glad you like it.
No, I mean, I just thought it was amazing because, it's something that made me think about small cultural differences, in places that you don't even realize, but until someone else points it out and you're like, oh, it is a thing. Because I think in Spain, our block of flats and things like that, and general urban development is very similar. You have tall buildings with big sort of flat entrances and whatnot. But in the UK, because we are more used to smaller houses and whatnot, the doors always seem like just very just functional stuff. It's the stuff that's allowing you to go into a place and another. But that made me think about my hometown and exactly things like that. Like, I would be walking down certain streets that are maybe not very old, but it's when suddenly new money appeared, and the doorway for the building would be huge, and it would be made of solid oak, and you know what I mean, things like that. And I would have always just thought, it's an old door, whatever. But with this thing that you started doing, then I started thinking, and I started doing some research, and I was like, it's not just an old door. This is like the building of a famous lawyer or a wealthy doctor or something like that. And it really started, creating these little urban narratives that we give, take for granted. But it was really when it really, really sort of made me realize why this is important and why we should pay a lot more attention to these ordinary things. Is when I was reading a book that I finished a couple of weeks ago, called The Hair with the Amber Eyes. For any of you who haven't read it, a really good book, very interesting book. It's essentially written by a guy. He's like a pottery maker, he does ceramics, and his family is Jewish, and they had a lot of money in the day, and he kind of inherits these items, and he wants to find out what's the story behind it. So he goes chasing the items all around Europe. So he goes to Paris, to Vienna, to Odessa, to different places. And one of the things he always spends a ridiculous amount of time talking about is the entrances to the family buildings. And then he explains, and then he finds like receipts or something about who they paid to make this and why. And then I was like, it was a thing. It was a thing. It was just so, it was just such an interesting moment for me, because I've always been very interested in urban history as a historian. The way cities develop is very, very strange. Very strange. So the fact that we've carried some of these traditions up until, even now, it's fascinating. And the fact that you can find something like that in a city like Bucharest and have a clear narrative, to me, that's just like, that's people to people history. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
That's an ordinary person sending a message to yet another ordinary person like me. And it's those little things that I personally live for. Like, some people in the chat will probably think, this girl is weird. What the hell is her thing with doors? But it is a thing. And perhaps it's because I come from a medieval studies background, but doorways and entrances to places, they were just so important from a cultural point of view. You were defining where the public space started and ended, and when the private sphere started and ended, just by a simple piece of wood that did this. So it's awesome, and I always look forward to these updates. So if you are not surprised by anything that I've said, or by the fact that Ruxandra posts about doors every single week, please do check them out, because it's generally a very nice, interesting narrative, or at least I think so.
Yeah. Who knows, maybe I'll do a tour about it in the future.
Well, you never know. We could be creating a niche audience right here today. Door makers, right? Inspiration. But yeah, on that note, and this is something that I always like asking people about, because we all have, different experiences on tours and stuff. And precisely because of the position that you are in Bucharest, being sort of like the underdog, what is the coolest or most sort of happy memory that you have on a tour? Something that makes you smile every time you think about it?
Oh, that's a hard question. There are many things I love about my tours and the people I meet on my tours. One experience that always sticks with me whenever I'm writing in my journals, memories, whatever, is a few times when tourists sang during the tour. I don't know if that sounds weird, but there are these definitely like two iconic moments that always pop up in my mind and always make me smile. One is a group of American guests who were traveling through different countries in Eastern Europe on a river cruise. And when I took them on a bus tour of Bucharest, it was my mom's birthday. And anybody who knows me knows my mom is the most important thing in my life. And so I was sad because I was working and I wasn't with her. So during the tour, everybody on the bus talked to each other and decided to sing her happy birthday. So I called her and we video called, and she was really excited about it. So yeah, I wasn't singing myself because you don't want to hear that, but my guests are really nice and, well, like typical American guests, very kind. And the other singing moment was with a group of very nice Spanish ladies who are really fans of karaoke. And when we were visiting Bucharest and we went inside the Palace of Parliament, when we got to the room that has a very special acoustic, they thought it was a good idea to spontaneously organize into a song, which, if anybody is wondering, was Hijo de la Luna de Mecano.
Not any song, not any song, a proper Spanish hit. You know, this is top level, people.
You can bet it was the only time in the history of the Palace of Parliament that anybody sang Mecano.
For sure. But oh, that must have been. Was it good singing?
Oh yeah.
Oh, okay, good. I was going to say because that's a problematic song. It could go both ways. But no, that's amazing. I see. That's one thing I've never had in any of my tours is anyone singing.
Not yet.
Not yet. We shall see. But that must have been like amazing. I mean, particularly because I know how much your mom is like awesome. I find it so sweet when you post stories and you guys are doing things together and stuff. I just think it's so cute because I have a very tight relationship with my mom as well. So it kind of reminds me of that. But the fact that an entire bus of tourists decided to do this for you, like, you must have melted in that moment. Did you cry?
No comment.
Won't tell. No, that's very nice. And I think when you have moments like that, it's what makes all of the other little bits, worth the while. It makes you forget for a moment that maybe not everyone is coming to Bucharest, but the people that are coming to Bucharest, they're really engaging, right? And they really connect not just with you, but with the city. And I'm sure for them it's also an iconic moment because this connection happens, this spark happens. So it's awesome, and I am now gonna be waiting for the day when I have singing tourists in my tour, and I'll come and tell you. I will be like, guess what happened? Today is the day. Well, I'm becoming aware of the fact that we're starting to run out of time, but I have one last question for you, if that's okay, that I would like to ask. And this is purely from a selfish point of view, because as you guys know, I love food, I love history and food, and I know Romania has some very amazing food. So is there a particular thing that you can eat in Bucharest that is like a nice thing to do? Like if you go to Bucharest and you eat that, it's like a traditional thing and not like, not touristy, something that the locals would do. And you can think, yeah, I had an authentic Romanian experience. Is there such a thing?
For sure.
Yeah.
I would recommend as a true authentic experience, the market, the biggest market in the city, which has this, I guess you can call it a restaurant, but that sounds fancy and it's really the opposite. So yeah, at Obor Market, which is east Bucharest, you'll find anything. So most locals actually come from other districts to get their groceries there. Plus electronics, fashion, anything you need, you get it at lower prices usually at the War Market. And then after shopping is done, there is this terrace outside of the market with 20, 30 tables, always packed, usually with men, and sharing stories about football and politics and arguing and then having a beer and forgetting all about it. And the grill at the terrace serves the best traditional Romanian sausage you can eat anywhere in Bucharest. I've taken guests from different countries there, used to elegant restaurants, and I've never had a complaint about it. The sausage is called mich or mititei. It's the same thing. It means little sausage. And it's usually made of pork only. That's traditional. And it looks a little different because when they developed this recipe in Bucharest, they actually ran out of the skin they normally would stuff a sausage into. So they just pack the meat, put it on the grill, super simple. You serve it with bread and that's it, and with mustard. It's really the most delicious, simple experience you can have in the city.
That sounds good. It's interesting, yeah, because when I was thinking sausage, I guess I was thinking either of, what for me as a Spanish person is something that has a shape of a sausage, which can be either chorizo or something like that, or more like a German sausage, or a hot dog or something like that. But now that you're describing this, it kind of makes me think more of like, I don't know what it makes me think of actually, but it sounds really interesting. It sounds really interesting.
It is.
Is it just then pork meat, nothing else? No vegetables or anything else?
Spices.
Just spices. Excellent. I'll be looking into that.
Put it on the list.
Because that sounds very cool. And the best place to get it is in this market. See, this is the thing that doesn't matter how many times you go into TripAdvisor, you can't find that. It's the sort of local knowledge that you really benefit from when you have a guide or when you have someone who is local and knows the area. Because otherwise, I suspect that, like you said, you would arrive, you would see all of these men sitting down, having their beer, and you will think, I'm not eating there. Like it will probably come across as very, like, you are not supposed to be here kind of moment. But I always tell people, if you're ever in a new city that you don't know and you feel like you shouldn't be somewhere, then it probably means that tourists don't go there very often. So you are actually experiencing the city for what it is, which is good, no matter how many dirty looks you get.
No, the people are really nice. That's one thing to remember always about Bucharest.
Yes, because I think that's the other thing that normally, puts people off from going to, well, I say faraway places, but I think, particularly like from a Spanish point of view, or even from a British point of view, people think that Eastern Europe doesn't speak English or something else, or that they are gonna find a very sort of cold attitude. And normally when you get there, it's rather the opposite. I've always found, anywhere that you travel, you always have a problem or stuff if you are not familiar with the culture, right? You can find it hard, but it's all about letting go and giving it a go. Just seeing how it goes, and often you are surprised when you do that, I think, and it's when you have the best travel experiences. But I'm biased. I'm a tour guide, so what am I going to say? Well, that being said, we literally have a couple of minutes left on this, so any last words that you would like to pass on to people listening now or later at home about yourself, your tours, or Bucharest? Anything? The floor is yours.
Well, the words of wisdom. I would just invite people to let go of any preconceived ideas and come and see how Romanian people really are. And when they'll travel here, they'll be surprised about how much we have in common, because maybe from a far away distance, it does seem like we're all very different, and different ethnicities and different religions and different skin colors and different sexualities. But when you travel, you actually really see how wonderful the world is and how much we have in common. And I think any trip actually makes us all kinder, better human beings.
I agree. These are definitely words of wisdom. 100%. Well, thank you so much for that. This is literally the end of today's talk. But thank you so much, Ruxandra, for your time and for your knowledge and for actually myth busting Bucharest for us, because this is very much needed. Thank you everyone that has been on the chat and that has been following. I really hope that you find this super interesting and that you get in touch with Ruxandra and go to Romania or anywhere else that you maybe were scared or unsure, and actually, try it out and tell us what happens next, right? Because we will be wanting to hear a lot about it. But that's all we have time for today. So thank you so much, everyone, and have a lovely evening.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.